everyone, this is Sahiti on behalf of Edureka and welcome to this session on RPA tutorial for beginners. So thank you all the attendees for joining in today's session. Before we get started, all of you just give me a quick confirmation on the chat window whether I'm audible or not. Okay, I've got a yes from Vishal, Shanaya, Arpita, Vijay, and I've got a few more yeses too. So that's great. So now let's move on and let's see what all we're going to learn in today's session. We're going to start today's session by first discussing why do we actually need RPA, and then move on to discuss what exactly RPA is. Once we're done with that, we'll look at different tools which can implement the RPA technology, and then out of those tools, we'll choose the UiPath tool. And finally, after going through all the concepts of RPA technology and the components of UiPath tool, we'll move on to a hands-on part where we'll be deploying a project based on stock prices and data scraping. Okay, so let's move on to the first topic of today's session, that is why do we need RPA? Let me explain you this with an example. As you know that every bank has a system known as fraud detection system. So let's just take the example of this credit card fraud detection system here. So now any transaction that is coming in it is judged on the basis of the rules that you've designed it, right? So let's just consider these rules could be something like this. Maybe, for example, the last location of the access for your credit card is far away from the access which is showing on the screen, right? Or it could be anything which is being showing in the transaction right now. It becomes suspicious then. Second, the usual amount of transaction that you transact may be around 20 to 30,000 of cash, but suddenly if you make a transaction of 500,000, it's a huge number. So that again becomes suspicious. And then finally, the third rule could be the number of trials or the number of times you enter the wrong PIN, right? So that could be someone who has caught hold of your credit card and he's trying to get the money out of your credit card, right? So this could also be a suspicious transaction. So if you were to judge a transaction based on these rules, one way of doing it is through the human workforce, right? So this human workforce was actually being used like 10 or 15 or 20 years back when there was no automation system or there was no automation tool invented. So there were a lot of people whose sole purpose was to investigate each and every transaction and authorize that transaction based on those rules, right? But as and when the automation came in, 95% of these transactions are automated and the rest 5% of those transactions are just flagged as anomaly now. So now a question may come out to your mind, why are they anomalies, right? So anomaly is basically the transaction which cannot be judged by the automation system. Now, you cannot program your code to judge everything, right? That is, you cannot program your code to see the world. So there are always some loopholes and there are always some situations that computer cannot judge, and that is when you need the human intelligence. So this is where you'll be needing your expertise and you'll be judging whether this transaction is fraudulent or not. Okay? Nowadays, many people ask me this question, will RPA replace the human workforce? So guys, let me tell you that it is not entirely true. It may reduce the workforce that is already existing on a project, but it will never be able to reduce the human workforce which is already working. Because for each and every department, you need the human touch. Because the difference between a machine and a human is that machines are good in following the things that we tell them, but humans are capable of thinking out of the box. So they're capable of thinking something new, which machines are not. So guys, that is the reason that there'll be always vacancies for humans to work inside the departments and RPA will not replace the human workforce. Alright, so now let's take one more example here. Let's take the example of the data entry employees. So typically the job of a data entry employee is to take data from multiple sources and aggregate them inside one file. So basically this employee would follow the same steps each and every day for each and every iteration, right? So basically, he's doing these steps every day for each input of data and then getting his job done. But what if we can tell our computers to do those same tasks and get those jobs done? So basically, we're trying to automate these tasks by making use of robots or machines or an RPA tool. And now these tasks become much more faster, much more robust, and much more accurate, right? So in some situations, automation is definitely a boon, and in some situations, it could be a threat to your own job. Alright, so now let me give you some interesting facts regarding RPA. According to McKinsey's research, by the year of 2025, there'll be an economic impact of $5 to $7 trillion. So guys, $5 to $7 trillion is a huge amount, isn't it? It also says that it will touch more than 230 million knowledge workers. So don't get scared with this line because it says that it will touch 230 million knowledge workers. So basically what it means that whatever task that you're doing today, maybe you'll not do it tomorrow, right? So you might be doing a different job or a different set of tasks or a different set of tasks that may be expected from you, isn't it? So basically, what I'm trying to say is don't get scared with the fact that RPA may replace you because RPA is never going to replace the human workforce. Now let's move on and understand why RPA is relevant from a company's perspective. So if I'm the CEO of the company and I have to think about implementing RPA in my company, what are all the things that I'll consider? So first of all, if I'm using RPA, it saves a lot of cost because I'm downsizing my workforce with a large number, right? I won't be paying huge amount of money to large number of employees and I'll also be getting my work done very fast, isn't it? So it saves both time and cost. So like I said before, it's more accurate in lesser time because machines do not commit mistakes, right? So they never get tired, they never commit any error, they don't need sleep, they're never emotionally unproductive, they're just very accurate and they do every task in the least time possible. Alright, now moving on. It makes it very easy to implement and learn. So let's just say to do any task you have to write in a code, right? What's the point of writing thousands of lines of codes for very small tasks? It's better to do the task on your own rather than writing thousands of lines of code, isn't it? So that is the best part of RPA. It makes it easy to implement and learn, it saves cost and is also more accurate in lesser time. So now let us move on and see the part where we'll understand what exactly RPA is. Alright, so what is RPA? As you might have guessed by now, RPA is the acronym for Robotic Process Automation. So let's understand these terms Robotic Process Automation. So what is robotic? Well, robotic is basically any entity which can be programmed to mimic human actions, right? So any entity which can mimic human actions is said to be robotic. Process is basically a sequence of steps which lead to meaningful activity. For example, if you have to make tea, so what do? You have a process to make a tea, right? So your first step is to pour water and then let it boil, and then you put some tea leaves in it, and again you let it boil. Once it's done, you pour some milk, and then the tea is ready. So what have you done here? You have followed three steps, right? You've poured some water, you've let some tea leaves boil in it, and then you've put in some milk, right? Following these three steps, you could make a tea. So this is what basically is the process of making tea. Alright? So basically any sequence of steps that lead to a meaningful task is said to be a process. Then comes automation. So automation is basically when a task happens automatically without any human intervention. So basically any task that happens without any human intervention is said to be automated. So now if you take all these three words together, robots mimicking human actions to process any task without any human intervention is said to be robotic process automation. So guys, that's what basically RPA means. Alright? So now that you've understood the definition of RPA and you know why do we need RPA, let's look into the benefits of RPA. Well, talking about benefits of RPA, RPA provides various benefits like accuracy, consistency, productivity, elasticity, reliability, and all that I mentioned before, right? So RPA can be used to make right decisions, reduce output variance, use minimal resources, produce reliability and geographical independence. So any task that you wish to do with such factors, then you can use RPA. So now let's move on and see which companies are using RPA. So basically many hypergrowth companies like Deloitte, Capgemini, Accenture, Cognizant use RPA to scale their businesses in this ever-growing industry. So basically they use RPA to produce more outputs in lesser time, right? So now moving on, not only at a business level, but at an individual level, a typical RPA project has majorly three responsibilities: the process designer, the automation architect, and the production manager. Now, if you come to the process designer is basically responsible for understanding the process. So if you become a process designer, your work would be to make sure that the people working on the RPA project are in sync, right? So basically, you have to monitor the changes that happen after the implementation of the project and then collect the feedback during the development or the testing phase, right? So now coming to the next role, which is the automation architect. If you choose for the automation architect builds the RPA project using the RPA tooling. So if you have to become an automation architect, you should gain expertise in any of the tools such as UiPath, Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, or any tool, right? So basically, any automation architect would be a core member of the automation team and should have some experience in the programming and solving real world problems. So you should understand what the real world problems are and you should analyze how to solve them with the help of RPA, right? Finally, after an RPA project is built and then architected by the automation architect, it goes into the production and the testing phase. So here comes the responsibility of the production manager. So basically, the production manager would be responsible for monitoring if the processes are triggered or not, if the exceptions are handled. He or she should report the bugs and also review the process analytics, right? These are the main three roles in a typical RPA project. Scope in RPA, not only at a business level, but also at an individual level. You can first learn how to automate tasks and then implement them at a business level for an ever growing company, right? Now, coming to the real life applications of RPA, RPA can be used in various domains such as telecom industry, insurance, banking, and healthcare, right? So, when it comes to the telecom industry, RPA can be applied to most of the processes within the telecom industry, but the most feasible scenarios are when these solutions can flourish to take up the backup information of the client systems, upload the data on regular basis of the clients, consolidation of the client phones, etc. Coming to the insurance industry, RPA can be used to automate the administrative and customer service activities such as receiving, reviewing, and analyzing the insurance, right? Similar is the case with the banking industry where RPA can be used for data validations, data migrations, comparing the mortgage values, financial claims of the processes, and all. And finally is the healthcare industry, which is an ever-growing industry with large amount of work, right? So RPA can be used to automate the work such as for the patient registration processes, the patient data migration, patient data processing, reporting for the doctors, medical bill processing, etc. Right? So guys, this list doesn't stop here. The list continues on and on and on for different domains in various sectors. So guys, if robotic process automation is given a chance in any domain or in any sector, then it can create miracles, right? So guys, that was with the RPA use cases. Now let's go on and move on to different tools that can implement the RPA technology, right? So basically there are various tools that can implement RPA technology, but as of now, these are the top three tools available in the market. That is the UiPath, Blue Prism, and the Automation Anywhere. So guys, these are the three tools, but why are we going for UiPath tool? So let me tell you the differences between these three tools and that will give you the answer of why we are choosing the UiPath tool over the other two tools, right? So when you talk about licensing, guys, let me tell you that Blue Prism does not provide any trial version. So what you can do is you have to request a company and maybe if they think that you'll be buying this product, then you can just test it and they might give you a trial version of 15 days, right? So when you talk about Automation Anywhere does provide you trial version, but it is only limited for 50 tasks. So it's not feasible when you have to learn something new, isn't it? But when you come to UiPath tool, the UiPath tool provides a trial version that is the community edition in which you can practice and learn about the tool. And once you think you've gained enough expertise in the UiPath tool, then you can go ahead and buy the pro edition, right? So guys, since we want to learn how to automate tasks using the tools, we'll be using UiPath tool. Now let's compare these top three tools according to the Google Trends. Well, as you can see that the UiPath tool is one of the top tools in the world right now. So guys, let me give you a few pointers in order to which why you should start your RPA journey with UiPath tool, right? So UiPath tool is the top tool to learn RPA as it does not require any programming knowledge, right? So you need not have to learn any programming knowledge or any person out of the IT world can also implement this tool, right? UiPath tool is also among the top tools in the market leaders as it has gained popularity for its usability and simplicity, right? So basically it's very simple to use. So you just have to drag and drop your functionality to set the solution for your problem, right? Moving forward, UiPath has a standard studio version which has a trial period of 60 days. UiPath offers a community edition which is free for lifetime. So if you want to practice how to automate tasks, you can practice at any extent in the UiPath tool and once you gain expertise, you can buy the pro edition and implement it at a business level. So guys, that is the reason that I'm suggesting you guys to go forward for UiPath tool. So guys, let's move on to the hands-on part. So every day you see this stock market, right? A lot of data is coming in, going out. A lot of companies are putting in the stock retrievals, right? So we have a scenario here of a company named Stock Holdings Portfolio Limited, which is basically a stock brokerage firm. This company facilitates various trading accounts like online share trading, commodity trading, option trading, IPO, PMS, etc. for the Indian stock market, right? So what was observed in this company is that there were many employees whose sole purpose was to scrape the data of various companies and then put it in their firm, right? So this costed them a lot of time, effort, and money. Now, with the evolution of various technologies in the scaling industry, this company also thought to use the RPA technology as the solution to their problem. So now let us see how company overcame these challenges by using the UiPath tool. So for that, let's get into the UiPath tool and let's start exploring the project. So let me just open the UiPath tool. So now let's move on to the demo part here. So for that, we have to first create a blank project. So let's just click on the blank project option here and then choose the name of the project. So let me just say as project and then click on create. So this would basically create a simple blank project. So now what I want to do is I want to read a CSV file in which we have the input of the 6-7 companies that we're going to deal with. So for that, we have to first drag and drop the sequence. So basically, sequence is something in which we'll do all the activities related to the project. So let's just drag and drop the sequence here. So once you drag and drop the sequence here, as I said before, we want to read the CSV file. So let me just search in the search bar for read CSV and then drag and drop it here. One thing I would like to tell you here is that before you get into the read CSV file, you have to check whether the packages are available or not. So for that, you have to go here on the manage package option and then search for Excel option here, right? So let's just search for Excel here. And then you can see that I already have the UiPath Excel activities installed on my system. Just in case you do not have it installed, you just have to click on the radio button here, which comes as the install option. All right. So that will make that particular package available for you, right? So let's just continue here. So to read the CSV file, you have to give in the file path location, right? So let's just click on this three dots option here and then go to the path where I've stored my CSV file. So I've stored it here on the desktop and then I'll click on open. So this would automatically feed in the directory path for your CSV file. Alright. So in the properties section, if you observe, you can see that the output isn't stored anywhere, right? So now to store the output, you have to create a variable. So for that, let's just click on the output section here, press on Ctrl K and create a variable name. Let's just say I create as output stock, right? So this would automatically create a variable for me. So basically what we are trying to do with this output data table is that we're trying to give the input from the output stock variable name to this data table, which would then produce the output. All right. So let me just search in the search bar for the output data table and then drag and drop it here. Once it is done, in the properties section, you can see that the output isn't stored anywhere, right? So for that, it's just very simple. You again have to create a variable. So let's just press on Ctrl K and then create a variable. Let's just say I put the name as output data table. So basically I've created an output data table variable which would take all the input from the output stock variable and then produce an output. All right. So now what we have to do is we have to assign variables. So for that, just search in the search bar for assign activity and then drag and drop it here. So now what are we going to assign? Well, we're going to assign all the output from the output data table to a variable named single stock. All right. So for that, let's just create a variable named single stock, and this should be of character array type. So for that, let's just choose an array of t and then let's choose string. All right. So this would basically create a character array. Let's just click on OK here and our variable is created. So now let's just assign the single stock variable to the output data table and then separate each value with a comma. So for that, let's just type in single stock here, and over here, let's just type in output data table and then choose the split option to separate each value with a comma. So let's just include comma in double quotes and then assign this to the array. Now once this is done, you have to drag and drop an input dialog, which would basically ask you for which day you want to scrape the data. So it could be for day 1, day 2, day 3, or any number of days, right? So for that, let's just search in the search bar, input dialog, and then drag and drop it here. So once this is done, you have to mention the title and the label. But now let me just tell you one thing here is that any text that you mention in the UiPath tool should be under double quote. So let's just mention it under double quotes. Let's just type in what day is it, and let the label be also what day is it. So now if you observe here, you can see that the output isn't stored anywhere. So what's basically happening here is that any input that you give in the input dialog, let's just say if you put the number as 1 or 2 or any number, that isn't stored anywhere. Now if you want the number to get stored anywhere, you have to create a variable, right? So for that, let's just press Ctrl K here and let's just create a variable named num. So if you observe here, a variable is created of a generic type as num, right? So we have assigned the output to the variable num. Now after the variable is assigned to the output, any input that you give in the input dialog, let's just say any number that you give like 1, 2, 3, any number, that is automatically stored in the output. So it makes it very easy for us to understand which day are we working for, right? So now let's go through what all we have done till now, all right? So we have assigned the values, we've also given the input for which day we want the results, and now what we want is the output. So for that, we have to put them in a data table. So in the search bar, let's search for data table, and then let's choose the option build data table. All right, so let's just drag and drop it here. And in the properties section of the data table, you have to store the output in some variable, right? So let's just press on Control K here, and then let's say we store the output in the F table. So let's just type the name as F table and press on enter. All right. So this stores the output in the variable name data table as F table. All right. So now what we have to do is we have to click here on the data table option and then give the column names, right? So let's just click here and then choose the column names. Now if you observe here, we already have 2 rows. So let's just remove 1 row here and then let's start adding columns, right? So let's just say the first column is the name of the stock. So let's just type the name as name of stock of string type and then click on OK. Let's just add more columns. Here we're going to deal with 7 different companies. So we're going to add 7 different columns, all right? So let me just show you the file we're going to deal with. We're going to deal with companies like Tata Steel, Reliance, Axis Bank, HDFC, and so on. So basically, we need 7 different columns for 7 different companies, right? So let's just create those columns. Let me just mention the name as 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on till 7, right? All right. So we have created all the column names, and then after this is done, you just have to click on OK. Now if you observe here, we have created this variable single stock, right? So for each single stock value, you need to store the values for every day, right? So for example, you give the input as day 1, you want all the values for day 1 for all the 7 companies, right? And if you continue the loop for day 2, you want all the values for all the 7 companies. So this has to go on for the complete week. So to perform this functionality, we will search in the search bar for the for each control flow. So let's just search for each and then drag and drop it here. Alright guys, so for here we have to mention for each item that we would be using the variable expression, right? So for here the item would be stock. So basically for each stock we're going to perform the same iterative process, right? So for each stock in single stock, we want to perform the iterative process. So for that you have to just mention like this. Now one more thing I would like to tell here is that you have to make sure that the argument type is of string. We're dealing with strings here, so we have to deal with string type, right? So now once it is done, you have to drag and drop the sequence here in the body section where we would mention the iterative process that we want the tool to perform, right? So for that, let's just type in sequence here and then drag and drop it here. Now, in the sequence section, you have to include the open browser. So basically, this open browser activity would open the browser that you mentioned and then perform the functionalities, right? So let's just search in the search bar for open browser and then drag and drop it here. Now, in the open browser section, you have to mention the URL through which you want to take the data, all right? So suppose I want to scrape the data from the google.com, I'll mention the URL of Google, right? So let's just include it in double quotes. And then in the do section of the open browser, you have to include the delay. Sometimes there could be any delay caused due to network issues, right? It's very common. So for that, let's search in the search bar for delay and then drag and drop it here. In the properties pane of the delay, you have to mention the duration. So let's just say I mentioned the duration of like 1 second. So let's just include this in this format. After that, you have to include the keyboard type into so that it takes all the values into account which are specified with the text, right? So for that, let's search in the search bar for type into and then drag and drop it here. Inside this, you have to indicate the element inside the browser from where it should locate the text, right? So let's just go for Internet Explorer. Let's just open this. Let's go for google.com. And then we want any text mentioned here should be identified, right? So if you type in prices of ICICI or prices of Tata Steel, it should identify that text. So for that, we have to select the screen. So let's just go back to the UiPath tool, click here and indicate the screen, right? We'll just click here and this would automatically get indicated, right? So now what text we want to mention here is prices of. So any text starting with prices of is included with all those in the stock variables. So it could be prices of ICICI or prices of Tata Steel, prices of Reliance, prices of HDFC, etc. and so on. And generally, when you type in Google, what do? You type in the text and you press enter, right? So to enable that option, you have to click here on plus sign and then choose the special key, enter. Now, one main important thing that we forgot here is that we did not mention the stock variable, right? So this loop runs for each stock variable in the single stock. Stock could be once equal to ICICI or stock could be once equal to Tata Steel. So to concatenate that, you have to include the stock variable here. So for that, let's just put a space here, put a plus sign and include stock. All right. So once it is done, this would take all the inputs. Alright, so once it is done, you have to perform screen scraping. So for that, you just have to click on the option screen scraping here. So what is the screen scraping? Well, screen scraping is basically you're extracting the data out of the screen, right? So you just have to click on screen scraping option here and then let's just choose this option, that is the stock price that we want to store. So let's just click here. This will lead us to a screen scraper wizard and over here click on generate table and click on finish. Alright, so this would basically create a screen scraping option for us, but now if you observe in the attached browser, this only takes the input for prices of Tata Steel, right? So now if you want to take the input for various stocks such as prices of ICICI or prices of HDFC or Axis Bank or any such feature like that, what you have to do is you just have to remove this Tata Steel option here and then just include a star option, alright? And then click on OK. And then even in the span part, you have to make sure that the output is stored in the span variable and then the selectors also have the Google search included. So for that, let me just include the Google search and then click on OK. Since we do not have to create any data table, we can remove this option. So let's just remove this by right clicking on it and then delete. After that, we have to assign a span output for each value in the single stock. So to enable that, we have to create a variable I. So let's just create a variable I of int type and then let's just assign this variable. So let's search in the search bar for assign activity and then drag and drop it here. So now what are we basically trying to assign is that we are going to assign for each value the single stock, that is the input values, right? So for that, let's just type in I is equal to I plus 1, right? And then we have to finally close this application. So let me just open this application and then let me just go back to the UiPath tool and in the search bar, let me just type in close application. And then let me just drag and drop it here. So inside this, let me just go to this option and choose the close button here. So that would basically close the application. So once we are done with closing the application, this complete process was for a single day. Now, if you want to scrape the data for various number of days, obviously need to store the data day wise, right? So for that, we'll add a row. So every time you scrape the data for a particular day, automatically an extra row would be added, right? So for that, in the search bar, let's search row and then choose the option add data row. So just drag and drop it here, all right? So now once you've added this data row here, what you have to do is in the properties pane, you have to mention all the entities you want to include in the array row, right? So let's just mention all the entities we're going to include. So let's just say if we include the first entity as day, so for that, let me just type in the text and then concatenate it with the number that we're going to specify through the num variable, and then separate it with a comma and then mention all the stock values. So there are 7 companies. So we're going to start the numbering from 0, right? So we're going to mention single stock 0, separated by single stock 1, single stock 2, and then so on till 6, right? So let me just write that. All right, and then click on OK. In the data table, you have to mention the output tables. If you remember, we mentioned the output table as F table. So let's just mention that here. And finally, we have to append it to a CSV file. So for that, in the search bar, type in append and then choose the option append to CSV. All right. Over here, mention the path name. That would be the path that we mentioned before. So it would be daily stock prices. And the data table would be the output table, which is F table. Now, if you have to check if there are any errors in your program or not, you just have to click out of the sequence and then you have to check for the exclamation mark. I observe no exclamation marks here. That means our program is fine. Alright, so let's just run this program and see what happens. So let's just click on run. And then here choose the day. Let's just say we want the information for day 1. So let's just click on 1 and click on OK. So as you can see, Google has opened, everything is happening automatically, right? So it's taking all the stock values of different companies. Once your program is successfully completed, it will get you back to the screen. So now let's go back to the CSV file and check if our data is stored or not. So let's just go here. And you can see that the information for day 1 is stored, alright? So now if you run this task for day 2, let's just see what happens. So now let's just open the CSV file and let's just check. So now you can see that the information is stored for day 2 also, right? So that's how you can continue for day 3, day 4 and so on, alright? So if you observe here, the UiPath has definitely reduced the work by calculating the stock prices for all the companies for each day. So now guys, there is one more thing that you can do in this project. After calculating the stock prices for a complete week, you can find the average for the stock prices, right? So if you think you have found out a solution to do that, please comment out in the comment section below. So that's all for today's session. Thank you and have a great day.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!